We're talking to Dr. Ron Heilmann, the superintendent of schools in the Eau Claire School District. Tell me about this possibility of eliminating the athletic directors. Who could potentially be eliminated? What kind of savings will that be? I know you guys are struggling to try to fix this hole in the budget.
Right. As we very early, right after we passed the budget for this school year, started looking at our budget for next school year, we realized the extent of the hole. Again, a large part of that $5.1 million is the $3 million we're taking out of our cash reserves or fund balance to make this year, to make it through this year. As we talked about that, we talked about, and I've really focused on keeping the impact away from students in classrooms. And so we've looked, long and hard at all positions that are away from classrooms. Probably the reason we started to talk about athletic directors is we have one of our athletic directors that is retiring. And we talked about not filling the position and having one athletic director serve both schools and exactly what that would look like. And as we talked about that with our two high school principals, we said, well, is that preferable to reassigning those duties and perhaps giving some more duty days to one of the people we have currently on staff, but then having somebody at each of our two major high schools serving in that role? So that's how that discussion all came about. The actual dollar savings, we're actually working on that, and we'll be releasing that information this afternoon. But again, as probably anybody would suspect, it's substantial, but it would move us towards making up some of that $5.1 million.
I know your former school district of Oshkosh, when you were in Oshkosh, that's a sports town too, having lived over there for a while. In most school districts are like that, but some school districts are more intense than others. This is a major sports area and a major sports town. What do you think the impact will be with elimination of, or possibly that way with elimination of athletic directors?
Well, the one impact we've talked about, which does concern me a lot, is right now having an athletic director at both of our school sites. Those people are very accessible to student athletes, to coaches, and to parents. While we would have somebody doing those duties, they would have other duties also. So, one of the downsides would be the accessibility to somebody to, almost immediately address whatever concerns or issues come up regarding athletics, athletic eligibility, or what have you.
Dr. Heilmann, I must tell you, I admire your position about protecting the academic side of the school experience, and I contend if it's got the word extra in front of it, it probably has to be looked at pretty closely. Anything extracurricular outside of academics, is that kind of your posture when it comes to looking at trimming the budget?
That's a tough question. I would say it is and it isn't. And the reason why I would say partly it isn't is because just the other night, Monday night, we had our Parent Advisory Council meeting. And we started the meeting by talking about a very positive thing that people remembered about their educational experience, and it was amazing. I would say probably somewhere around 30 to 40% of the people mentioned something having to do with an extra or co-curricular activity. And so we realized that plays a huge role in shaping the school experience for all of our students, whether it's in athletics, in band, in choir, in forensics, what have you. So we know it plays a very critical role. However, at these times when, school districts are really financially strapped, I feel like I need to protect as much as I can, and really that's a charge of all of us in our community to really protect as much as we can those things that are central and core to our mission, which is the education of all of our students.
Again, we're talking with Dr. Ron Heilmann, Superintendent of Schools here on News Talk 790 WAYY. I know looking to the future a little bit with extracurricular activities, this affects more, some people think they're kids fooling around. This actually affects scholarships and various other things. The future of some of these kids could be affected if some of these activities are taken away. Not just sports scholarships either, but drama, music, various other scholarships that these kids wouldn't be getting if those activities aren't in place.
Yes, and again, when we talk, the comment about, these being extra, the fact is that really this complements and really producing well-rounded citizens for our community. And you're right, it's amazing, you can get a scholarship if you are a very strong student in theater, for instance. And so those are very, very important programs. And, as we had this discussion about, well, where do we make the cuts, when we talked about extracurriculars, personally, I and several of the people close to me said, do I keep an athletic director and cut student activities? That just seemed to run counter to what again, is what we're all about, which is really focusing on student programs and services.
Are we down to a single school for Sage, Dr. Heilmann?
Well, the proposal that the board looked at on the 5th, or the three options, was to totally eliminate it, have it at one school at Longfellow or two schools. The board, when they asked me, I said, I would support keeping it at two schools. Longfellow and Lakeshore are two highest poverty. I know the board really had a very good discussion that evening and really looked at, I think they looked at it from every possible angle and are struggling with it. And I think why it is such a tough decision for the Eau Claire community and for any school community in our state is that once you give up Sage and once you are no longer a participant, right now there is no schedule in getting back into the program. Once you've given it up, you've given it up.
I know there were in excess of 80 ideas that have been sort of thrown at the blackboard by civilians and people within the school system. And any other ideas that you see some daylight in that maybe have been advanced by members of the public or members of your staff or of the schools?
Well, one that we're looking at, and really it's funny you asked about the Sage, because what we could potentially save on this may be contingent on what we do with Sage, is looking at our transportation. As for any school district, transportation is a major cost, and I've talked to all of our state legislators and really almost begged them and said, if you can do anything for schools, there's two things you could do that would help out not just the Eau Claire area school district, but would help out every school district in our state. And that is, number one, take transportation out from underneath the revenue limit formula. So it's not driven, I don't have to cut that or cut some other student program and service to keep the buses running. So take that out from underneath. And then number two, take extracurriculars and athletics out from underneath revenue caps. That is extra, as we talked about before. I've never gone to a football, a basketball, a volleyball, or a swim meet during the school day. It happens after the school day. It's really part of our community service program, which that we're permitted to keep outside of revenue caps, but again, because of regulations, and that would actually require a change in state statute to permit us to actually fund that outside of revenue caps. That would be very helpful. It wouldn't solve all of our problems. It would not pass an incredible tax burden on to the local taxpayer, but it would help every school district in our state, and Eau Claire in particular.
How big a bite is transportation, Dr. Heilmann?
In excess of $4 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, those are two excellent ideas you had. I hate to bring this up, but I'm going to.
Go ahead.
Bill Klaus, where does that stand?
We are still working on that. As you know, there was a claim filed. Our attorney is working, or actually our attorneys are working with Dr. Klaus's attorney in trying to bring that to some closure. At the present time, Dr. Klaus is on a paid leave, in an unpaid suspension, and we anticipate Dr. Klaus coming back on June 16th.